Welcome to the DBeast Monitor, an open-source application designed for monitoring the Elastic Stack. In this video, we'll walk you through defining a new cluster in the DBeast Monitor. Before we begin, let's assume that you already have DBeast Monitor installed. In our example, we'll be working with two clusters, a production cluster and a dedicated monitoring cluster. However, you can use your production cluster for monitoring as well. The setup process will be quite similar. Let's start by downloading the DBeast Monitor application, which we'll need for the new cluster setup. You can find the latest release on GitHub. To define the cluster, we need to add a new user to both clusters. You can also use existing users with the necessary permissions. Examples of user definitions can be found in the Setup folder. Next, let's add the required templates to the monitoring cluster. You can easily do this by copying them from the templates file in the setup s_config folder. Once you've done that, let's open the Grafana Add New Cluster dashboard and fill in all the required fields in the Source Connection section. Press the Test button, and if your clusters return a green or yellow status, go ahead and press Save. This will add your cluster to Grafana, where you can view it in the Cluster List section. Next, we'll download the Logstash configuration files for your monitoring Logstash. These files are essential for transferring Elasticsearch metrics to the monitoring cluster. Extract the files and upload them to the Logstash configuration folder in your monitoring Logstash. Add the new configuration to the pipelines files. If you're not using the Linux Logstash service, be sure to update the configuration file paths. If Logstash is set to auto-reload configurations, the new pipelines will start automatically. If not, please restart Logstash. Now, let's head back to Grafana. In the new cluster dashboard, add the new logstash. Enter the server host or IP in the server host field, and the monitoring logstash API host in the logstash API host field. If you haven't changed the defaults in the logstash configuration file, the default host is localhost, and the port is 9600. Define the logstash logs folder as well, which by default is /var/logs/logstash on Linux. Press save and download the configuration files. You can add multiple log stashes, and you can define new ones later if needed. As with the previous steps, you'll need to extract, upload, and update configuration files accordingly. Once everything is set up, all pipelines will be running, and you can monitor the results in the cluster monitoring section. The final step is to define the cluster UID in the beats that you're using for regular cluster monitoring. You can find example configurations in the setup beats_config folder. With that, your cluster is now fully defined and ready to be monitored. That's all for this video. Enjoy using DBeast Monitor.